Good morning. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Great to see all the three of you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the panel that's called Business Innovates Sustainability. You know, emissions are much like the virus. They don't respect borders. And there is no quick fix when it comes to climate change. There's going to be a very heavy lift ahead. And the key piece of it is what I hope to get into with our panelists today for you, which is how do you innovate? How do you innovate to help bring down the emissions? Because human behavior is going to be a part of it. And obviously, we're going to have to rely a lot on innovation. Some have said that we probably know how to get 50% of the emissions that we've committed to get out of the sky, out of the air. We know how to do that. That, of course, leaves the other 50%. And many feel that we actually don't know how we're going to get the other 50% that we've already committed to out of the sky. And that's where business and private sector and innovation is going to play a very large role. But in order for businesses to do what they need to do, we need our governments to do what they need to do. Right. And it starts with that. It starts with making sure that we have, around the world, cooperation with our governments to bring about predictable, stable, certain regulatory regimes that allow you to have a long-term view on how you're going to deploy capital that you first need to mobilize. That's the key piece here. Without government doing its piece, it's going to be very hard for our private sector to do theirs. So having that right framework, making it predictable, making sure capital can form, and frankly, making sure talent can be brought into our countries to help execute on that is going to be a very big part of that. So let's dive into the business role with that backdrop in terms of what we're trying to do here, and discuss some of the examples of innovation and tech solutions. On this panel, we're going to cover the corporate commitments to net zero, a little bit about regenerative agriculture, some of the innovation and tech solutions that are already starting to take place with our panelists. And on all fronts, you're going to see, I think, a need for a regionally coordinated effort. That doing good all by yourself in climate change is probably not going to make much of a difference at all. You actually have to work together much beyond where you live, in your city, in your country, in your region, in your hemisphere, and frankly, coordination around the world. So let's get started. You've got their bios. I'm joined this morning by Juan Carlos Mora, who's the president of Bancolombia. I start with the money first, so the finance guy gets introduced first. And then Pilar Cruz, who is the chief sustainability officer at Cargill, and Erick Scheel, who's the president of PepsiCo Beverages in Latin America. So let me, as I said, start with the money. How are you, in fact, financing projects for climate adaptation at Bancolombia?
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. I am glad to be here talking about this subject, which is challenging, and it's very challenging now, and more than ever after the pandemic and what happened, particularly in countries in Latin America, where we focus on the social issues around the pandemic and all the issues around the environment. The net zero were left behind for a while. But now we need to think again on what are we doing. In Colombia, we heard yesterday President Duque saying that the country committed to reduce 51% the CO2 emissions by 2030 and the country to be net zero in 2050. That's fine, but we need to do concrete things to achieve that. And we start from there, and the key point is how you work together with governments and start doing concrete things. What are we doing? We are measuring the emission in our portfolio, meaning what are we financing? And what we found at the first a high-level measure that we did is that 1% of our portfolio emits 30% of the 5 million tons of CO2 that all portfolio is emitting. So we are going to focus on those 1%, working with them and helping them finance their transition in concrete projects. which is going to help us a lot, is that Colombia issued the green taxonomy last March. Why is it important to have a green taxonomy? Because you now have a framework in which, with which you can work on specific projects, and you know what projects are green, because there is a lot of greenwashing. And I mean, many of it is not intentional, it's because there is not a standard framework in a way that you can work together with with the governments, public sector, private sector, working on specifics. So that measure that we are doing in our portfolio, starting with that 1%, then we will move to more what we call transition industries, which is around 6% of our portfolio, but they emit 50% of the total CO2 that we measure. Then from there, you start concreting projects and start financing those projects and working with the government to create that framework in which we'll evolve on concrete, with concrete goals in order to achieve that I mentioned, the reduction of the 51% of the CO2 emission by 2030.
So what I hear you saying is incent the behavior that you want, right, in your portfolio. So Cargill could well be a customer. What are you doing, Pilar, in the food ecosystem to help bring about some of the emissions reductions that we're seeking?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for the invitation. We're delighted to be here with all of you today. And I wanted to share a little bit more about Cargill. For those who are not very familiar with our company, we're a family-owned, privately held company based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We have been in business for over 157 years, which is remarkable. And we employ over 160,000 talented people around the world in about 70 different countries. Our company's purpose is to nourish the world and to do it in a safe, responsible, and sustainable way. That's all we do, food security and agriculture. To answer your question, for us to deliver a more sustainable and resilient food system, we begin by developing and implementing a very clear sustainability strategy in our company. We have 3 specific priorities that we are focusing on, and those include people, our commitment to human rights and improving the livelihoods of the farmers. Second priority is land and water, which both are very important elements in terms of food security and protecting the planet. And the last priority is climate. As we all know, climate change is the #1 priority for companies, customers, governments, and communities. So for us, it is our commitment and the investments we are making to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, both within our operations and our supply chains. And one of the programs that we were talking about earlier today, which I'm very, very proud of, is our commitment to regenerative agriculture in North America, but also around the world. We got a very exciting program in North America. We made a commitment to adopt regen ag practices across 10 million acres of farmland in North America, which is fantastic. So these include things such as cover crops, no-till, introducing technology to allow the farmers to do more with less, energy conservation, reduction of water consumption at the farm level, which for us is fundamental, and leads into carbon sequestration, which is obviously one of the ways that we are tackling the issue of climate change. And I would say, as a woman from Latin America, I live in the US today, but I'm from Colombia. And to me, what is most important is the impact that we are having right there on the ground with the farmers. So we begin actually where the food system begins, and that is with the farmers at the farm. And we focus primarily on making investments together with companies such as PepsiCo, with obviously financial institutions such as Bancolombia, in a way that we put programs in place that allow the farmers to be more efficient and effective. And one of the examples that I'm very proud of sharing with you today is one of our farmers, and this is one of many examples we can share, in Brazil. So this is a family-owned farm, and they are soy. They grow soy in Brazil. They adopted some of our programs, including the SSS Sustainable Program. After the introduction of the program, they saw an improvement in yields of about 8% in 1 year. That is huge. So more to come, but again, to me, it's not just about the program and the investments, but it's the impact that we are having both in the livelihoods and economic life of the farmers, as well as the planet.
Terrific. Well, we'll come back to some of the issues that you've raised. Let me turn to Eric and ask about PepsiCo specifically and what you're doing to help address sustainability. And I'm going to stick with you afterwards, so don't answer my second question just yet.
Hey, Goldy. First of all, I would like to say that you mentioned that we need government, we need, but we need everybody to work together. And the first thing we need is we as companies, we need to take the responsibility to change. And when you see, I've been in PepsiCo for over 20 years, so you can see the change that we have over 20 years, the narratives, the conversation that we have is completely different. Myself, I have changed a lot. I have educated myself. I went into Google. I learned by myself. The company has also. So it's a self-taught process.
For many of us when you say that, by the way.
Yeah.
We're all going to be honest. Yeah. Probably that's exactly the case.
Yeah, but the knowledge that I have today is completely different to the one that I have 3 years ago, or probably the last year. I'm not an expert, but I've been educated. So what we have done on PepsiCo is putting the sustainability agenda at the core. So part of us is the first thing we need to do, because if you do that, then all the people, all the talent that we have is going to educate themselves and understand what we need to change. So because if we don't understand what we need to change, then how can we communicate to the consumer or governments or NGOs what we need to do? Because we need to work together, but we're the experts in our industry. So we're responsible to educate. So what we have put together is a sustainability agenda. We call it PEP Positive, and it's basically very, very similar to what you have. We have 3 pillars, which is positive agriculture, positive value chain, and positive choices for our consumers. The agricultural part is similar to the one we have. Actually, we work very close together with Cargill. We have the positive value chain. In our case, distribution is very important, packaging is very important, cold product is very important, especially for beverages. As an example, we have reduced the amount of plastic that we use for our bottles the last 10 years, and 40%. We have reduced the amount of energy we use for the coolers in about 25% in the last 5 years. And we have been working with our suppliers. We have been developing technology. So by having that strategy as part of the whole strategy of the company, we're changing and moving and promoting things to happen outside our borders.
Right. So
people who make coolers for us, they have had to change their technology. They have to improve their technology. They have invested. By changing the strategy and putting and setting some targets for the future, we have put some pressure on our agenda to change the way we work.
Now you, in your response there, kind of brought about the supply chain impact that you can have throughout your, in your sphere, if you will. One of the things, of course, that gets a lot of news around the world is the use of plastic. And so I'm wondering if you can talk about, and you and I had a good discussion in the green room about how it's easy for government to just say we ban plastic tomorrow, but what are the consequences of that, and how do you manage that? So what exactly are you doing to get us off plastic?
Yeah, well, that's, we have, when we talk about net zero emissions, and for beverages, probably the 3 most important things are agriculture on the sugar cane, and the second most important is plastics. But plastic is a phenomenal product for the quality of the product. So it is not a bad product. It's incredible. It's incredible. Consumers, when we see a can in the streets, you don't feel bad about seeing a can, an aluminum can, because the recycling process is already there. Technology is there. When you see plastic, because we have all this communication, the plastic is bad, and probably you are imagining a turtle in the sea with a plastic bottle. The problem is that we didn't develop the technology to recycle the plastic as we developed for the aluminum cans. So what has happened the last 20 years, and especially the last 5 years, is that technology behind recycling PET, recycling plastic, has accelerated a lot. And there have been huge investments, and of course there's a lot of money behind the transformation plans. Right now in Latin America, it's probably 50% of the PET we produce is already being recycled. But just to put a plant for recycling PET is more than $200 million. So there's a lot of investment that you have to do. So what we have been doing with PET is creating this cycle, but we have to work with our competitors, with governments, NGOs, consumers, because the most difficult part is not getting the money and to invest in it, is collecting the PET, the plastic. And so we as consumers, we need to collect plastic. We need to work with the communities. We need to, and for us Latin Americans, it's kind of easy because it's very informal, the process for the collecting part. But we need to organize the communities. We need to work together to do the collection part. So that's the critical part. So that's what we're doing with plastic, which is it's a journey. We know we're gonna be able to recycle probably 50% of the PET by 2030, but to get to 100%, it's another task. That's gonna be more difficult.
Well, that speaks a little bit again back to the money, because you are the one who has to finance some of the risk innovation. Really, we don't know if many of the things we're investing in there's actually going to work or not. There's a lot of money being put aside for the innovation agenda around climate change. What kinds of things are you looking at that may not be available today that you could see financial sector, banking and others get involved in terms of how you finance and what innovative schemes that you use, if I can call them that, to help finance the adaptation?
I see very positive. There is a movement on joint efforts on how to finance all of this, because it's key. I mean, there are many issues. It's education. You mentioned education is key. You can make the investments, but you need people to really understand this process and be part of it. So I see an effort, and one that I am very confident that is moving forward is the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, in which now there are more than 400 financial institutions around the world working together on issues of how to finance this. And that joint effort is starting to produce results. As an example, we in Bancolombia are part of an effort that are piloting initiatives. There is one in India and one in Colombia, and was sponsored or promoted by Michael Bloomberg. It's called the Climate Finance Leadership Initiative. In what we are doing is to have concrete projects in the next 2 or 3 years in which we join efforts, private sector, governments, the social entities, in creating those projects and finance them in that joint effort. And we pick 4 areas in which we want to work. One is green hydrogen, which is key, and we need to develop the technology, but also to scale all the infrastructure needed for green hydrogen. Circular economy, which is key, and in countries like the ones in which we operate in Latin America, it's also could have a very positive social impact, because it becomes a source of income for many people that they don't have other ways to do it. So it's a very good initiative, and working on circular economy. Renewable energies, definitely it's key, and financing solar, wind energies it's very important. And also we will work on, President Duque yesterday mentioned that Colombia has the largest fleet of electric vehicles in Latin America. But we need to create the network of chargers for those vehicles. So you need to create the infrastructure for that to work and really create a positive effect. So working concrete on those 4 topics will allow us to move in the direction of meeting those targets, which, by the way, are right here. I mean, when we're talking about 2030 and 15 years ago, that was far away, but now it's really close, and we don't have much time really at this point.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue to the question that I want to ask Pilar, because I started off by saying this is going to be hard. We haven't actually made a lot of progress in terms of where we need to get to. So I'm wondering, one of the themes in this last 2 days, president, vice president, almost every president or leader of a country that spoke here stressed the need for a partnership with the private sector.
Yep.
Government and private sector are working together. Now that sounds lovely. How's it actually going?
Yeah. I mean, look, you touch on some of the most complex issues that we are dealing with at the moment. For Cargill, it is about nourishing the world, feeding the world, and protecting the planet. So the challenge that we are facing at the moment is by 2050, the world is going to have 2 billion additional people that we have to feed. And the question is, how do we do that within planetary boundaries? We know that we cannot do that alone. We have very strong partnerships with everybody throughout the supply chain. So from farm to fork, including customers and suppliers, financial institutions, local community organizations, NGOs, and the government as well. Because we do believe that we need to put the talent and the expertise and the capabilities of all of these organizations together in order to make meaningful impact. I'm very proud to say that we got a very exciting innovation fund. So this is the Land Innovation Fund that we introduced in Latin America in partnership with a lot of local community organizations that are helping us identifying technology projects to eliminate deforestation. And that is huge. We couldn't do it alone. So we are partnering with the government, with local communities and companies such as PepsiCo, in a way that we are looking for solutions that are sustainable, meaning not just from a sustainability perspective, but also solutions that will stay and will last. And perhaps the second example that we were referring on earlier on is traceability and responsible sourcing. We know the consumer of today, and many of us, not only we want to know where the food is coming from, how was the food manufactured. So if I get a Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, the first question is, I wonder where this is coming from. So the corn, the sweetener, the water, and who manufactured the Diet Pepsi that I'm drinking today. So the question is traceability, data, digital, and analytics for us to be able to provide that information to the customer that is super valuable and ultimately for the consumer. So we got an interesting platform called WISE, which is the digital platform that we are utilizing in our supply chains to trace back, for example, cocoa. So if you eat a chocolate bar today, we can most likely give you a lot of information about where the cocoa beans came from. So information about the land, the farm, the farmers, the size of the farm, which is absolutely fundamental for us to think about climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and the support we can provide the community. But we cannot develop these solutions alone. So again, in partnership with governments, with customers, with suppliers, and we know that by partnering and finding alliances, we are going to make a difference.
So Eric, let me pick up on that. How do we move from, at least in this hemisphere, if we can, given where we are, to do more, to move from effectively good intentions to actual concrete measurable outcomes?
Yeah, well, that's, I would like to be positive, and I think we're moving there. Of course, we're learning how to get there, but we're moving there, and I think by working together, all entities, this is not anymore silos. We need to work together. I think that's probably the biggest difference to what the world used to be 20 years ago. We are global companies. We can influence different countries. We can influence the consumer. So it isn't not only about governments. It's also governments, but it's also all of us working together and try to put things together. I think one of the key things that we need to do is educate the consumer, because there's a lot of communication, especially now with the social platforms. You can hear whatever you want to hear, but definitely we have a responsibility, and it is not by this is part of what I do in Pepsi, is it is what I tell the people who works with me, it's not about you going to the beach and pick some bottles. That's not we need to work with the community and build the collection side. That's difference. That's creating differences. So education is key. Working with the industries. Probably we never worked that close with Cargill as we work today. We never worked that close with Coke as we work today. So it's important to forget about those silos and work together. So I think that's and investing in technology. We do invest in new technologies because I'm totally convinced. You mentioned the electric solar panels and electric cars. All of those, that technology is still expensive, and we need to keep developing new technologies to drop the prices down. So investing in technology, it's critical. It's critical to move ahead.
Mindful of the clock here, I want to get a reaction from both of you because you all have customers. You all have people that need to invest in your product or purchase from you. We saw in Europe what happens if governments get too far ahead of their public. The recoil is on, I can't afford what you're doing and I want my natural gas back. So how are you communicating? How concerned are you that we might be getting too far ahead of the consumer, who is also a partner, has to have skin in the game, and may not be ready for what's coming their way? How are you managing that challenge?
Yeah, I think an important aspect of sustainability that people don't often talk about is financial and economic sustainability. To me, is obviously the environmental side of sustainability, is the social side of sustainability, but it's the economic and financial aspect of sustainability that is important. So we actively work with our customers to understand the cost of these investments and to understand that it's going to take time for us to successfully executing those. Innovation and education is something that we also work on actively every single day, but educating the consumer and the government, or working closely with the government, to understand that it takes time. The issue of climate change, as an example, is not one that we are going to solve overnight. So working together to understand the plans, the roadmaps, and I'm proud to say we have a clear roadmap for the 3 priorities that we explained before, but it takes time. It requires investments that we are making, but we want to make sure that we are working with the government to see policies that, number one, support open trade, free trade, but also support the agricultural sector. That is the only way that I think we're going to make a difference.
Great, thank you. Juan Carlos?
Yeah, I want to pick up what Pilar said. I think sustainability at the end, it's how a society works well together and means that it's going to last. So we need to balance many things. And in the case of Latin America, what happened is that the social part of sustainability is key. We need to work on the environment, and it's very important, but we need to have societies that are viable, that are giving opportunities to everybody, and we there have a huge challenge in many countries in Latin America. So that balance, it's very important. Another point that I want to raise is that we need to work on science-based solutions, and particularly politicians and governments need to be realistic. You can go to Congress or promote a law that could sound very, very good, but you need that law or that framework to be implemented and to be realistic, and you need to base that on science and on facts. So working together in that aspect is very important. So we have a huge challenge, but we are all working together on that direction.
Well, that's a good place to stop. I want to thank each one of you and thank the audience for participating in the panel. What I heard is it's hard work.
Yes.
It's going to take a partnership, and innovation is going to be a very big part of that. And to echo Erick's positive optimism, we can do this.
Yeah.
We can do this if we do it together. So again, thank you all for joining, and thank you all for participating. Please join me in thanking our panel.